I used to think the phrase work husband was one of those harmless office jokes people threw around to make long meetings feel less miserable. Then I watched it crawl out of my wife's mouth with a smile on it, and somehow our house never felt the same after that. The first time Emma said his name in that tone, I felt it before I understood it. Not jealousy, not yet. More like that small cold shift in your gut when something in your life moves half an inch out of place and you know you're the only one who noticed. My name is Caleb. I'm 38, I live outside Denver, and for most of my adult life I've been the kind of man people call steady. I manage operations for a regional supply company. Early mornings, long spreadsheets, truck schedules, vendor calls, all that glamorous stuff. Nothing flashy, but it paid well, kept our mortgage current, and gave us the kind of life that looks solid from the outside. Emma and I had been married for 11 years. No kids. Just a golden retriever named Wally, a 2-story house with a coffee stain on one step we never fully got out, and routines that used to feel comforting. Emma worked in marketing for a medical software company downtown. She was sharp, polished, and good with people in a way I never tried to be. She could walk into a room full of strangers and leave with 3 new contacts, an invitation to brunch, and somebody's life story. I used to love that about her. I used to sit across from her at dinner and listen to her talk about office politics, client presentations, impossible deadlines, and the weird little ecosystem inside her company. She made it all sound alive. Somewhere along the way, I stopped being part of the stories and started just hearing them. At first, it was subtle. Small enough that if I said it out loud, I sounded insecure even to myself. She started dressing a little sharper for things that never used to matter. Not every day. That would have been too obvious. But suddenly there were Thursday team drinks she needed a new blouse for. Quarterly planning dinners that apparently required heels. Holiday mixers where she spent longer getting ready than she did for our anniversary reservation the year before. I noticed because I am the kind of man who notices patterns. I know how many eggs are left in the fridge without opening it. I know when Wally needs his nails trimmed just by how he sounds on the hardwood. And I knew my wife was putting more effort into being seen at work than she was into being with me. I told myself that was normal. People care about their careers. Ambition isn't betrayal. She wanted a promotion. She wanted to be taken seriously. That was fine. More than fine. I supported it. What I didn't know how to support was the coldness that seemed to come home with her. It started in bed, like these things always seem to. Not with some dramatic rejection. It would have almost been easier if it had been dramatic. Instead it was that slow, polite distance that makes you question whether you're imagining it. I'd reach for her waist and she'd say she was exhausted. I'd kiss her shoulder and she'd barely react. She began sleeping on the far side of the mattress like the middle had become a border neither of us talked about. If I tried to be playful, she'd give me that tired little smile people use on telemarketers and say she just had a lot on her mind. A lot on her mind became every night. I wasn't asking for fireworks. I just wanted to feel like my wife still saw me when she looked at me. But after a while, every attempt at closeness felt like I was interrupting something invisible. She'd keep scrolling, keep typing, keep checking tomorrow on her phone like I was background noise in my own bedroom. Then came the office event season. Before that year, Emma used to roll her eyes at company gatherings. She'd call them fake fun with bad wine. Suddenly she cared. Suddenly there were after-hours mixers, leadership dinners, volunteer luncheons, and some charity auction I swear did not exist the year before. Her calendar filled up so fast it looked aggressive. And she became weirdly protective of it. That was one of the first things that really lodged in my chest. We had always been loose about our schedules. Shared calendar on the fridge, quick heads-up texts, the normal married people stuff that keeps a house from turning into an airport terminal. Then all of a sudden, if I asked what time she'd be home, her answers felt clipped. If I glanced at her phone while she was entering something, she'd tilt the screen away without even realizing she was doing it. Once I asked whether she wanted me to make dinner because she had a late meeting, and she responded so fast, so guarded, that it actually stopped me. She said she had it handled. Handled what, exactly, I wasn't sure. I started hearing more about the people at her office, but one man kept showing up in the stories. Nolan. Her boss. Technically not her direct boss, but close enough that his opinion mattered. At first he was just a name attached to projects. Nolan thought this. Nolan wanted that. Nolan said the presentation needed more edge. Nolan loved her pitch. Nolan noticed details nobody else caught. Then it changed. The way she said his name changed. She began talking about him like he was exhausting and impressive at the same time, which is a dangerous combination. She'd complain about how demanding he was, but there was energy in it. She'd tell me about his standards, his discipline, his long hours, the way he could walk into a room and command attention without raising his voice. I remember standing in the kitchen one night while she described how driven he was, how he remembered everything, how he never settled for average. She didn't say I was average. She didn't have to. After that, comparisons started slipping out of her without warning. Not direct ones. Those would have started a fight. These were cleaner than that. More deniable. She'd mention how some men stayed hungry in their 40s. She'd say ambition was attractive in a general sense, like she was commenting on the weather. She'd ask if I'd ever considered doing something bigger, moving into corporate strategy, taking more risks, building something of my own. Always casual. Always framed like she was trying to help. The thing about being married a long time is you can hear what isn't being said almost louder than what is. I started looking at myself through her newer, colder eyes. My work boots by the back door. My worn baseball caps. My predictable schedule. The fact that I was home at 6 most nights and tired by 10. Things she used to call dependable now seemed to embarrass her. Not openly. Just in those tiny hesitations that leave a mark anyway. And still, if you'd asked me then whether I thought she was cheating, I would have said no. Not because I trusted everything. Because I didn't want to put a name to what I was already feeling. There was one Friday that stays with me more than the others. It was late fall. She came downstairs dressed for an office awards dinner in a black dress I hadn't seen in over a year. Hair done. Makeup better than usual. Perfume I recognized from our anniversary weekend. She looked incredible. The kind of incredible that should have made me feel lucky. Instead, I just stood there with my hand on the kitchen counter feeling strangely unnecessary. I told her she looked amazing. She thanked me, but she said it while checking the time. Then she asked if I thought the dress was too much for the venue. Before I could answer, she was already looking down at her phone. I caught the screen for maybe half a second. Long enough to see a message preview with Nolan's name on it. Nothing explicit. Nothing even inappropriate. Just his name and a line about timing. She turned the phone over immediately. I remember forcing myself not to react. Not because I was calm. Because I suddenly wasn't. She left 10 minutes later, and the house went quiet in that ugly, stretched out way silence gets when your mind starts filling it for you. I fed Wally, loaded the dishwasher, sat down, stood up again, checked the window twice like I was expecting to see something in the driveway that would explain everything. Around 9:30, I texted her and asked how the event was going. She didn't answer. At 10:15, I sent another one. Nothing needy. Just asked if she'd be home much later. Still nothing. Then, a little after 11, her shared location went dark. And that was the moment my stomach dropped, because for the first time, it didn't feel like I was being paranoid. It felt like I was already behind. When Emma got home that night, it was past midnight, and I was still awake on the couch with the TV on mute. Not because I wanted to confront her. I didn't. I wasn't ready for that. I just couldn't settle down. Every room in the house felt wrong after her location disappeared. I had spent the last hour trying to explain it away in ways that sounded reasonable. Maybe her phone died. Maybe the app glitched. Maybe the event moved somewhere with bad reception. I must have built 10 different versions of the same excuse in my head, and none of them held up for long. I heard her heels in the entryway before I saw her. She came in carrying that same polished energy she'd left with, but thinner now, a little worn around the edges. Not guilty exactly. More distracted. Like her mind was still somewhere else and home was just the place she had to pass through before bed. She looked at me on the couch and seemed surprised that I was awake. I asked how the dinner went. She said it ran late, the usual networking, speeches, drinks, too much talking. Her answer came fast, smooth, ready. I noticed that before anything else. It had the shape of truth without the weight of it. Then she bent to take off her shoes, and I caught a smell that didn't belong to her house. Not perfume. Not alcohol. More like a warm, woodsy cologne clinging faintly to fabric. I hated myself for noticing that. I hated it even more when she set her phone face down on the kitchen counter without checking it once. Emma always checked her phone. Especially after work events. Normally she'd scroll through photos, answer messages, complain about somebody from sales, tell me who drank too much and which executive tried too hard to sound human. That night she didn't do any of it. She just said she was exhausted and headed upstairs. I sat there another 10 minutes after she disappeared, staring at the dark screen of her phone like it was something radioactive. That was the point where suspicion stopped being abstract. It became physical. A heaviness in my chest. A kind of alertness I couldn't turn off. The next morning, she acted almost completely normal. That was somehow worse. She made coffee. Fed Wally. Asked if I wanted eggs. She even touched my shoulder when she passed me at the counter, this brief casual contact that would have comforted me a month earlier. Now it felt placed there on purpose, like a prop in a scene. I watched her move around our kitchen with that effortless efficiency she always had, and I kept waiting for something in her face to break open. Some sign. But she looked calm. Then she started talking about the dinner. Not much. Just enough. She mentioned who won an award. She said the venue had been overrated. She said Nolan gave a speech that dragged on forever even though people still hung on every word because he had that kind of presence. Then she laughed a little and said ambitious men always thought the room belonged to them. I don't know why that line stayed with me, but it did. Because she said it with criticism in her voice and admiration under it. That weekend, I started noticing things I should have paid attention to sooner. Emma had always taken care of herself, but now there was a sharper edge to it. She wasn't just getting dressed for work. She was assembling herself for it. Better shoes. Better blouses. Jewelry she used to save for dinners out. She started waking up earlier to do her hair on days she claimed were packed with internal meetings. On Sunday night, instead of half watching a show with me like we used to, she spent 40 minutes in the bathroom trying on lip colors for what she called a routine Monday. Routine wasn't the word for any of it. I tried not to stare. Tried not to become one of those suspicious husbands who build whole cases out of mascara and scheduling changes. But once your gut wakes up, it starts collecting everything. Her calendar became even stranger after that. She used to leave it open on the kitchen counter when she was planning her week. Color-coded, over-organized, impossible to miss. Now she kept everything on her phone, and if I asked what time she'd be home, she answered like I was asking for access to a bank account. Not rude enough to call rude, but tight. Guarded. She started saying she had blocks on her calendar she couldn't move. She had working sessions. She had leadership dinners. She had pre-briefs and post-briefs and coffee catch-ups that sounded increasingly less like a job and more like a private world I wasn't allowed into. One Tuesday I asked if she wanted to go with me to dinner Friday. Just somewhere simple. Nothing big. She said she couldn't because there was a last-minute executive strategy event. I asked where it was. She paused just a second too long before naming a hotel downtown. That pause sat in my mind all day. At work, I kept losing my place in spreadsheets I'd done 100 times before. I forgot to return 2 calls. I reread the same shipping summary 3 times and still couldn't tell you what it said. Every time my phone buzzed, I checked it too fast. Every time it didn't buzz, I wondered what was happening in those hours where I no longer seemed to exist for her. The comparisons kept coming too, and those might have gotten under my skin even more than the schedule changes. Not openly. Never in a way I could point to later without sounding pathetic. But they were there. She'd mention how some men stayed sharp no matter how demanding their careers got. She'd say discipline was attractive. She'd talk about guys at her company who still had drive, who were always building towards something. One night while we were eating takeout at the island, she casually mentioned that too many people got comfortable and mistook stability for growth. I asked what that meant. She said nothing, just in general, just in general. That phrase started to feel like a knife wrapped in cotton. A few days later, she came home later than usual and more animated than she'd been with me in weeks. She was talking quickly, moving quickly, telling me about some presentation that had gone well. She said Nolan backed her in a room full of senior leadership. Said he understood how to push people to be better. Said most people didn't realize how rare it was to work with someone who really saw potential. I remember looking at her while she said it and realizing something that made my stomach turn. She wasn't talking to me. She was reliving something for herself. The warmth in her face wasn't for our conversation. It was left over from another one. After that, the distance at home got worse. She stopped reaching for me at all. If I touched her lower back while passing in the kitchen, she'd shift away almost without thinking. In bed, she took her phone with her and angled it so the screen didn't cast light my way. One night I put my hand over hers and she pulled back with this tired little exhale, like I was asking for too much from someone already overdrawn. She said she was just stressed. Said work had been intense. Said she didn't have room in her head for anything extra right now. Anything extra. I lay awake after that, staring into the dark, feeling that phrase settle into me. Not intimacy. Not us. Extra. The following Thursday, I got home earlier than usual because one of our afternoon vendor meetings got cancelled. Emma's car was already in the driveway, which surprised me. I walked in expecting to find her on a call or finishing emails at the table. Instead I found her upstairs in the bedroom, standing in front of the mirror in a navy dress I had never seen before, adjusting an earring. She looked startled when she saw me in the doorway. Not guilty. Not exactly. Just caught off guard in a way that told me she had not expected me to be there yet. I asked what the occasion was. She said there was a small office dinner. Nothing major. She said it too casually, which only made the dress stand out more. It wasn't a nothing major dress. It was fitted, elegant, the kind of thing you wear when you want to be remembered. I told her she looked nice. She thanked me, but her eyes had already gone back to her phone on the dresser. It buzzed while I was standing there. She picked it up so fast it was almost a reflex, glanced at the screen, and for the first time since all of this started, I saw real emotion move across her face. Not annoyance. Not work stress. Anticipation. Then she locked the phone, slipped it into her purse, and said she might be late. I don't know what expression I had on my face in that moment, but she noticed something. Her whole body shifted. She asked if everything was okay, and that question, asked that way, told me she knew exactly how much had already started to show. After she asked if everything was okay, I did what I'd been doing for weeks. I lied. I told her I was just tired. Told her work had been heavy. Told her to have a good time. Then I stepped aside and watched my wife leave the house in a dress too careful for a nothing dinner, carrying a version of herself I hadn't seen directed at me in months. The second her taillights disappeared, something in me changed. Up until then, I'd still been trying to preserve the benefit of the doubt. Still trying to be decent, measured, fair. I was telling myself there could be explanations, that distance wasn't proof, that marriage had dry seasons and complicated stretches. But standing in that quiet bedroom, looking at the faint dent her purse had left on the dresser and the half-open drawer where she had rushed to get ready, I stopped thinking like a husband trying to keep the peace. I started thinking like a man who already knew he was being managed. That night I didn't sit on the couch pretending to watch TV. I didn't pour a drink and stew. I went downstairs, opened my laptop, and started with the simple things. Her company website. Leadership page. Staff bios. Event pages. Public posts. Anything that might tell me what kind of office dinner required that dress and that expression. Nolan Harper wasn't hard to find. Mid-40s maybe. Sharp jaw, expensive haircut, the kind of smile that looked practiced in boardrooms and donor photos. His bio read exactly how I expected it would. Strategic, visionary, growth-focused, all the words ambitious people use when they want to sound essential. There was a company photo from a fundraising event 3 months earlier. He stood in the middle of a group with one hand in his pocket and that same effortless confidence Emma had described more than once. I looked at the picture longer than I wanted to. Not because of him. Because Emma was in it too. She stood 2 people away, smiling in a way I hadn't seen at home in a long time. Not a huge smile. Just open. Lit up. Present. Looking toward him, not the camera. I told myself I was reading into it. Then I found the event calendar. There was no office dinner listed for that night. That didn't prove anything by itself. Corporate people had private dinners all the time. Leadership meetings, donor events, client entertainment. Not everything got posted. But it was enough to push me past the point of pretending I didn't need to know more. I checked her location once. Still on. That surprised me. For the first 20 minutes, she moved exactly where she said she would. Downtown. Near the hotel district. Then, a little after 7, the location shifted again. Not far. Just far enough to matter. A restaurant 2 blocks over from the hotel she'd named. Upscale place. Reservation kind of place. Not where you grab a quick bite with coworkers after a nothing event. I stared at the dot on the screen so long my eyes hurt. I could have driven down there. The thought hit me hard and immediate. Just get in the truck, head downtown, park across the street, and see for myself. It would have taken 30 minutes, maybe less. I even grabbed my keys before I stopped. Because if I went, I couldn't come back from it. Whatever I saw would become the story. No more uncertainty. No more maybe. And for reasons I still don't fully understand, I wasn't ready to collapse the whole thing in one night. Not without knowing how deep it ran. So I put the keys back down and kept digging. Over the next week, I became someone I didn't recognize. Not reckless. Not dramatic. Just alert in a way that never shut off. I started paying attention to every little seam in our life. I noticed when Emma took her phone into the bathroom, even if she was only brushing her teeth. I noticed she changed her passcode after years of keeping the same one. I noticed she had started muting notifications when she came through the front door, then turning them back on in the morning while she packed her work bag. I noticed she smiled at her screen more than she smiled at me. I also noticed that when she talked about Nolan now, she was trying not to. That was almost louder than before. His name would hover just outside a sentence. She'd say leadership instead of him. She'd say they when I knew she meant one person. She'd come home from something work-related with color in her face and energy in her voice, then edit herself halfway through like she had remembered I was listening. People hide what matters. A few days later, Wally needed more food, and I stopped at the pet store near Emma's office on my way home. I told myself it was convenience, nothing more. But after I parked, I sat in the truck and looked across the street at her building for a full minute before getting out. Glass front. Keycard entry. Clean signage. People in smart clothes moving in and out with coffee cups and laptops. Totally ordinary. That was the maddening part. Affairs, if that's what this was, don't happen in dark alleys most of the time. They happen in normal buildings, under fluorescent lights, in places that still need parking validation. I bought the dog food and should have left. Instead I walked to the coffee shop on the corner and took a seat by the window. I wasn't there to catch anything dramatic. At least that's what I told myself. I just wanted to see the rhythm of her world. The people. The pace. The context of the man whose name had started living in my house without permission. At 5:42, employees started coming out in clusters. Laughing. Checking phones. Loosening ties. At 5:49, Emma came through the lobby doors with two women I'd seen in company photos. She looked normal. Tired maybe. Bag over one shoulder. Phone in hand. Then Nolan came out behind them. He didn't touch her. Didn't need to. What I saw was worse in its own way because it looked so practiced, so comfortable. He said something to the group. One of the women peeled off toward the garage. The other checked her watch and kept walking. Emma stayed half a step behind. Not because she had to. Because she wanted to. Nolan leaned closer and said something just to her. She looked down, smiled, then looked back up at him with that same open expression from the photo. It lasted maybe 3 seconds. Then they both straightened out and headed in different directions. Anybody else watching would have missed it completely. Nothing physical. Nothing obvious. Just timing, posture, attention. But when you've lived with someone for 11 years, you know when their face belongs to a version of them you don't get anymore. I sat there until my coffee went cold. That night, Emma came home and complained about traffic. Said the office had been draining. Said she could feel year-end pressure building already. Then she asked me if I wanted to watch something after dinner, and I nearly laughed from the shock of it. Not because it was funny. Because it felt like mercy offered by the same hand tightening the knife. I said yes. We sat on the couch with Wally sprawled at our feet, some forgettable show playing in front of us, and I spent the whole hour feeling like I was sitting beside a beautifully maintained lie. The next real break came by accident. Saturday morning, Emma was in the shower when her Apple Watch lit up on the bathroom counter. I wasn't snooping. I was grabbing ibuprofen from the cabinet because I hadn't slept right in days. The screen flashed a preview before it dimmed. It wasn't a name. Just a message that read, "Looking forward to Monday. You were brilliant Thursday." My whole body went still. No signature. No contact visible. Just that line. Brilliant Thursday. Thursday. The navy dress. The nothing dinner. The anticipation on her face when the phone buzzed. I stood there staring at the dark screen after the message disappeared, my pulse so loud it felt external. I didn't touch the watch. Didn't photograph it. Didn't do anything except walk out of the bathroom and sit on the edge of the bed like I'd just run uphill. Now I had something. Not proof of an affair, not yet. But something real. Something that connected a lie to a person, even if I couldn't see his name. From that point on, I stopped looking for comfort and started looking for pattern. Monday, she stayed late again. Tuesday, she said she had a leadership prep meeting that somehow required her to leave earlier than usual and come home later. Wednesday, she spent 15 minutes in the closet deciding between two blouses for what she called a long internal day. And by Thursday, I knew I wasn't dealing with one bad season in a marriage. I was tracking a private attachment growing in plain sight. That evening, while Emma was in the kitchen answering an email with her body turned away from me, her phone buzzed on the island. She moved too slowly to stop me from seeing the screen light up. This time I caught the name. Nolan. Just one line in preview before she snatched it up. Need to talk before tomorrow. Same place? She locked the screen so fast her hand actually shook. Then she looked at me, and for one long second neither of us said anything. Because now she knew I had seen enough to stop guessing. And I knew whatever happened next was going to tear the rest of the truth open. The moment Emma saw that I'd read Nolan's message, something changed in her face. Not panic. Not shame. Recognition. Like a door she had been holding shut with one hand had finally given way, and now all she could do was stand there and decide how much of the mess to let spill out. She picked up her phone, turned it face down, and asked what I saw. It was such a small sentence, but it told me everything. Not what do you think you saw? Not you're being ridiculous. Not it's not what it looks like. Just what I saw. I looked at her and said his name. Nolan. She didn't answer right away. She just stood there at the kitchen island with one hand resting near the sink, shoulders tight, breathing slower than normal like she was trying to keep herself composed. Wally wandered in, tail wagging, totally unaware that the room had turned into something neither of us could walk back from. I asked her one question. I asked whether there was something going on between them. Still, she hesitated. And that hesitation hit harder than any confession could have. Because people only reach for time when the truth is bad. She said it wasn't simple. Said I was making it into something narrow when it had been building for months. Said she hadn't meant for it to happen that way. I remember almost laughing when she said that. Because there she was talking about this like she'd slipped on ice, like feelings had just fallen on her from the sky while she happened to be dressed up for late dinners and hiding her calendar from her husband. I told her to stop dressing it up. Then I asked her again. This time she said yes. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just yes. She said nothing physical had happened at first. That was how she put it. At first. Like she wanted credit for those early boundaries. She said he understood her. Said he challenged her. Said being around him made her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. She said it started with long conversations after meetings, then drinks after office events, then private lunches that weren't really about work anymore. She said one night after that awards dinner, when her location went dark, they had gone somewhere else to talk. Just talk. She made sure to say that. I asked whether she expected me to believe that. She looked away. That was answer enough. Once she started talking, the whole thing came apart fast. The navy dress Thursday had not been for a group dinner. It had been for him. The message on her watch had been from him. The constant comments about ambition, drive, discipline, all of it had been bleeding from whatever fantasy she had built around him. She said she hadn't realized she was comparing me to him at first. Then she admitted maybe she had. Maybe more than she wanted to admit. That part burned. Not just because she cheated. Because she let another man move into her mind first, then slowly used him to make me smaller in my own house. I asked her the question I had been avoiding for weeks. I asked if they had slept together. She cried then. Not hard. Not broken. Just enough to make her voice unsteady. And I remember hating that. Because even in that moment some part of me wanted the tears to mean she understood what she'd done. But regret and consequence are not the same thing. She said yes. Twice. The first time after the awards dinner when her location disappeared. The second time the week after the Thursday she told me was nothing major. I don't remember moving, but suddenly I was by the back door with one hand on the frame like I needed the house to hold me upright. It felt like all the little things I'd been carrying for weeks had rushed together at once. The colder bed. The hidden calendar. The dressed-up excuses. The way she'd come home glowing from work and empty with me. It all had a shape now. A real one. Ugly and precise. Emma kept talking. I barely heard half of it. She said she was confused. Said she never meant to hurt me like this. Said Nolan made her feel alive and sharp and wanted, and somewhere in there she had started resenting how safe everything with me had become. Safe. That word landed like an insult. As if peace was something I had done wrong. As if steadiness was a flaw. As if the life I built for us was beneath the version of herself she wanted to become. Then she said something I will probably remember for the rest of my life. She said she hadn't realized how far it had gone until she saw my face just now. That was it for me. Because it meant all those nights I was lying awake next to her, all those mornings I was trying to act normal while she drifted further away, all those times I was still treating our marriage like something alive. She had not once fully stopped to see what it was doing to me. Not really. Not until it threatened her comfort. Not until the secret stopped feeling elegant. I asked if he knew she was staying married. She said yes. I asked if people at work knew. She didn't answer, which told me enough. I stood there in the kitchen and looked at the woman I had spent 11 years with, and the strangest part was how calm I suddenly felt. Not because I was okay. Because I was done waiting for the last piece to fall. The collapse had already happened. I was just finally standing where I could see it clearly. I told her I wanted the truth one last time, all of it, without editing. She gave it to me in pieces. It had been emotional for months. Physical for 2 weeks. Hidden behind late meetings, leadership dinners, and fake work events. They had a regular place downtown where they'd meet when they didn't want to risk being seen near the office. Same place. Just like the text said. He talked to her about a future like men always do when the present still belongs to someone else. She believed enough of it to keep going. And the whole time she came home to me. When she finished, the house was dead quiet. I thought I'd yell. Thought I might break something. Thought maybe all those weeks of suspicion would explode once I had the truth in my hands. But betrayal didn't feel loud in that moment. It felt cold. Clean. Final. I told her to call him if she wanted. Told her to call a friend. Told her to go to a hotel. I didn't care which. But she wasn't sleeping in our bed that night. She stared at me like she hadn't expected that version of me. Maybe she thought there would still be a negotiation. A wounded husband trying to measure whether love could absorb one more humiliation. But I was past that. She asked whether we could talk in the morning. I told her there was nothing left to protect tonight. She packed a bag in 15 minutes. I heard drawers opening upstairs, hangers shifting, footsteps moving from room to room. Wally sat by me in the living room, head on my knee, while I stared at the front door and listened to my marriage become luggage. When she came down, she looked smaller somehow. Less polished. Less certain. Like reality had started stripping away the fantasy faster than she expected. She paused by the door and said she was sorry. I believed she felt sorry. I just didn't care anymore. After she left, I walked through the house turning off lights one room at a time. Kitchen. Hallway. Bedroom. Bathroom. It felt strange how ordinary the motions were. That's the part nobody tells you. A life can split open, and your hands still reach for the same switches. I slept in the guest room. Or maybe I'd just lay there until morning. Hard to say. Over the next few weeks, the aftermath moved fast. I told her I wanted a separation immediately. Then I called a lawyer. I changed passwords, separated accounts, documented what needed documenting, and stopped asking questions that no longer mattered. She tried to talk, tried to explain, tried to frame it as a terrible mistake wrapped around a rough season in our marriage. But some lines, once crossed, don't lead back. They lead out. I later found out Nolan wasn't leaving his own situation nearly as cleanly as Emma had imagined. Men like that rarely do. Office whispers turned into HR problems. His promises got vague. His timing got complicated. The same ambition she admired in him suddenly looked a lot like self-preservation. By then it wasn't my concern. Emma cried more in those weeks than she had in the entire year before. Not because she suddenly loved me correctly. Because consequences are louder than secrecy. As for me, I stayed in the house with Wally and the coffee stain on the stair and all the routines that used to feel shared. For a while, everything echoed. Her absence. The quiet. The insult of how long I'd been standing in the dark trying to be fair to someone already halfway gone. But little by little, the silence changed. It stopped feeling like rejection and started feeling like room. Looking back now, the affair didn't start when she slept with him. It started the moment she began admiring another man's life enough to look at mine with contempt. That's the part that really kills something. Not the hotel. Not the lies. Not even the messages. It's when the person next to you starts making you feel small so they can live with what they're doing behind your back. And once I saw that clearly, losing her didn't feel like losing love. It felt like getting my sight back.